Okay, perfect. So before we before we get going, and Paula, we will turn on the videos later for the discussions. We're just leaving them off for right now for the presentation part because it's easier to see one person at a time when they're speaking. So just for a few Zoom notes, your microphone is muted, so just leave it muted, and then if your dog comes in or something, we won't have a bunch of background noise going on, and we'll be able to hear the presentations more clearly. And video also off for now. At the top right-hand corner of the screen, you might like to choose speaker view, and that will just give you a bigger showing of the person speaking and their presentation. And just especially if you're kind of new to Zoom and you're looking at the bottom of your screen, please don't click on the share screen button, because then everyone will see your computer instead of the presentations. All right, so let's get started. This is new to us for sure, but I hope it'll be a useful discussion for all of us. It's a time when those of us who do community work are having to find new ways of doing our work and really aren't able to do a lot of the things we normally do. But it's also a time when it feels really important to be working together as a community and caring for each other as a community. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So the focus tonight is really about peer-to-peer sharing. We're all trying things out and adapting our work and organizing during this time, and we want to learn from each other. It's good to see so many people have come out in so many different groups. I really thank you for coming out, and I look forward to learning from all of you. So here's what's going to happen tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction and share a few examples I've come across. And then we're really fortunate and grateful that 3 local groups who are doing some great work have agreed to share their experiences tonight. The Sudbury Community Garden Network and Sudbury Shared Harvest, the Sudbury Mutual Aid Community for COVID-19, and Miss and Mira's Community Arts. So each of them will be presenting for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have about 5 minutes for questions after each of those presentations. And then, because many of us are using online tools for the first time or in new ways, Rochelle is going to share a little bit about some tools that we can use to do that. And then we'll be opening it up for discussion and sharing. If you have questions during one of the presentations, we're going to ask you to type those in the chat box. Lily's taking on the job of monitoring all of those questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. And Rochelle's going to explain to us all how to do that in a few minutes. But first, I just wanted to show you a few examples that I've come across. So here in Sudbury, the Fridays for Future Youth have been having weekly strikes for over a year around town and in front of City Hall. And so they've moved those online and basically asking people to take a picture of themselves striking and share it in an online event every Friday. They've also organized online rallies with youth and with politicians. So down the highway in Parry Sound, the Climate Action Group there are holding pop-up driveway strikes. And so that's been another way they've continued their weekly strikes outside but separated in their own space. We've seen art and posters being used a lot on homes and yards and sidewalks and public spaces. So both with residents just spontaneously wanting to thank essential workers or hold an alternate version of a neighborhood event or just lift spirits around the neighborhood, but also community groups as well, getting a message out. And then of course, people really want to help each other out at this time. So there's been a lot of mutual aid and caremongering getting organized in neighborhoods and in communities as well. A lot of things have moved online, again, similar to this event. There's a lot of lectures and workshops happening, discussions, but also things like live streaming walks or having virtual walks through Google Maps. But then people have also made ways for people to get on the street either alone, like through a self-guided walk, for example, but also protests and celebrations are happening in new ways, like car convoys and pot banging demonstrations. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And we're going to get to the good stuff, which is some of the really great work happening locally here in Greater Sudbury. So before we get started with the presentations, just a reminder, if you have a question for the speaker, type it in the chat box, and Rochelle is just going to come in for a minute and explain to us how to do that in case anyone hasn't done it before.
Yep, so on the bottom of your screen where you have the Zoom tool bar, and you can just kind of scroll down there with your mouse if you're on a computer and it's not showing. You can find the chat button there. So you would click on that, that would bring up the chat bar, and then you can either direct information to everybody or to specific people if you wanted to in the group chat box there. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, and I just say if you want Lily to review your questions, please direct them to everyone so we can all see the questions and that Lily is sure to see them. All right, so are you ready, Colleen? Our first speaker is Colleen Zilio from the Sudbury Community Garden Network and Sudbury Shared Harvest, and she's going to be talking about the Cultivate Your Neighborhood initiative, which has a lot of adapting to do, supporting growing local food despite school closures, park closures, and physical distancing. So thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. I'm just going to load up the presentation here. So, well, I'm sure like everyone else, been doing a lot of reading online and, you know, reading editorials and opinion pieces. And I think overall the pandemic has really shown people that how important it is to be working at a local level, and that things are getting done neighbor to neighbor. And I think that was a huge inspiration for the group that's the Community Garden Network to really try and do some things differently. So there's been a tremendous amount of media about the issues related to food security and gardens. And so just to give you a little bit of background about who we are, the Community Garden Network is a volunteer-based organization, and we operated for a number of years as the Food Shed Project. And then in September of 2019, we decided for cost saving and streamlining purposes to begin to operate under the Sudbury Shared Harvest registered charity. So that's us now. And of course, my dog just started to bark. Okay, so I'll just pause for 1 second here. Okay. Sorry about that. The other big player in this area is the Sudbury Food Policy Council, and together we started to have a discussion as the gardens closed. So it was mid-March when the order came out from the province that all recreational facilities across the province, including private gardens, would be closed. And so we started a discussion using this sort of platform with our membership to say, okay, well, what can we do, and what actions can we take to salvage this season? So that's how the discussion really started. And we looked at really 3 areas of focus. First of all, the province, because there was an uneven so the province had closed down gardens, but it was possible for municipalities to actually issue another order which would overstep the provincial order to enable gardens to open. So we were really struggling between taking action at the local level and taking action at the provincial level to try to lobby to get gardens open. And both of, that was work at the policy level. And then we sort of stopped and said, oh, what can we do like neighbor to neighbor? And it sort of brought back, for those of us that are old enough to remember, like Tim the Toolman Taylor and his neighbor next door, where you could only see so much of his face. And they were able to share. And we said, well, couldn't we just get something going that would, at a grassroots level, that would improve people's ability to grow food, improve food security at some level within the city, help people to learn more about gardening, and get people outdoors. And that's where things really started to kick off with our fantastic group of people that we have within our network. We really got behind the provincial groups that were lobbying the province to get the gardens open, and most notably it was Sustain Ontario. They circulated an online petition, and we widely circulated that so that all of our membership could write letters and communicate with the province. We wrote letters specifically to the MPPs and worked really hard at trying to raise the profile of community gardens as an essential service. So that was one group was focused on that. Another group was focused on working with the city. And although we had a very direct indication from the city that we should not be accessing the gardens for any reason, we really tried to respect that order, as difficult as it was to accept that that's what was happening. Out of respect for our relationship with the city, we really tried to make sure that we were listening to them and accepting the fact that we had to socially isolate and follow the emergency orders. So that was how we dealt with the things at the provincial and the local level. Meanwhile, another group of people broke off to do a couple of different things. One of which was this idea of a seed exchange, that we could just swap seeds and get people growing seed companies across the province have been running out of seeds because people are really wanting to grow things and are concerned about being able to get access to fresh produce as the pandemic develops. And so we said, let's just try to get some seed exchange going. We have a wonderful business partner in Rochelle Rocha, who her business partner, Lori Pinnell, own and operate Seasons Pharmacy on Lawrence Street, and they agreed to just house a seed exchange for us. And out of that also came seed exchanges at the little libraries that exist on Brenda Street in Coniston, and I believe there's one other that I've forgotten at this moment. But so that whole thing really just exploded. So we've had hundreds of people actually coming in to exchange seeds. So meanwhile, Rochelle Niemela and Linda Hache and Paulette McDonald also started working with Councillor Deb McIntosh to develop an idea that Deb McIntosh had of really expanding starting a brand new precedent of supporting and expanding home gardens. And I'll actually let Rochelle jump in and talk about that. And the third element of this whole Cultivate Your Neighborhood project is the webinar series that had already been developed with Sudbury Shared Harvest and the Sudbury Public Library, again, to provide detailed information about urban agriculture and growing food in an urban environment. So Rochelle, do you want to jump in here and maybe make a few comments and give some details on the home garden project?
Yeah, just quickly, we also involved and brought in to the team councillors Al Sizer and Jeff McCausland, and all three of them tabled a request for Healthy Community Initiative funds last Tuesday night to council, which was unanimously voted in favor of $30,000 being allocated to the Home Gardens project, with the intent of hopefully addressing 300 families who would get free soil delivered to their house, 25 families per ward. We had very close to 500 applications in 3 days. So we are in the midst right now of coordinating responses and starting to order soil deliveries to hopefully 300 families across the city.
So things really started to happen quickly. Then April 26th, the province decided to allow community gardens to open with guidelines provided by the local medical officer of health. So again, our group became active to work directly with the city and the Public Health Sudbury District to establish the set of guidelines, which our group met this morning, early this afternoon to actually go through those guidelines. We're now awaiting signage for the gardens, and we are very hopeful that we'll be open in time for the long weekend. And again, we've had amazing media coverage about the gardens, especially with the announcement of the backyard garden project and the city funding that's supporting that. So all in all, I cannot believe how much success as a group, how much we've achieved in basically a month and a half. And I think some of the key elements of our success have been our ability to speak with a unified voice, really working hard as a group to keep our discussions and negotiations amongst ourselves, and then speak with a united voice. And the other huge part of this is the opportunity in all of this difficulty that's been experienced in the pandemic to be a good news story. And I think there was a key group of people that said, hey, there really is a chance for us to jump into the limelight here by doing some really good stuff at a grassroots level. And again, it's been moving quickly, being able to mobilize our group, being able to use tools like this, willing to accept some of the limitations and just, go forward. And we're so very, very fortunate to have an amazing cadre of volunteers that have just gone above and beyond and put in hours and hours of work to make all this stuff happen. So that's, I guess, the overview, and I'd be happy to answer some questions.
It's Rochelle, and I just wanted to throw in one last thing. We're also working on a side project with Sudbury Housing Corporation. We are going to be delivering soil for home gardens and or for balcony plots to, at this point, over 65 families who are living in social housing complexes and houses.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, Colleen. Lily, are there questions for Colleen in the chat?
Yeah, there's one. What will be the criteria besides which ward to receive the soil?
Rochelle, do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, I'll grab that one. So we didn't want to make any judgment whatsoever because there are a lot of families that are struggling out there who may have lost their jobs and aren't in the same situation as they would have been months ago. So it was basically first come, first serve.
So I see Paul has asked a question about whether we need volunteers to help at the gardens, at the community gardens. One of the restrictions that's been set up by the local health unit is that we are limited in the number of people that can access the gardens, and they've asked us at this point in time to limit access to the people who are the key organizers. So at this point in time, most of the gardens are not accepting new volunteers. As this whole transition rolls out, we're very hopeful that, you know, by June or so, when the gardens are really getting going, that we'll be back to a more normal situation, and we can actually then take advantage of all this wonderful media and really start to accept some of the new people that want to jump on board.
Lily, are there any more questions?
Yeah, Colleen, I think Desiree wanted to talk to you about Wanapate First Nation getting a community garden. So it's maybe not a question, but it's something they would like to get into.
That's great. We can definitely follow up as a result of this discussion. So I'll just reach out
Sounds
to you.
good. I'll make a note to connect the two of you after the meeting. All right, so thanks so much, Colleen. That's such amazing work. So
Thanks to the whole group.
yes, thanks to all the volunteers. It's just been a Herculean effort there. So is the next group ready now? So we have next we have Ren Ramsey Alexander, Sheena Calixte, and Shayla Gagnon of Sudbury Mutual Aid Community for COVID-19. And they're going to talk about how they're organizing online at the grassroots level around the concept of mutual aid to ensure vulnerable community members have access to food, toiletries, emotional support, and other necessities of life. So thanks. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, great, fantastic. Well, my name is Shayna Calix. I'll talk a little bit about myself in a moment, but very excited to be here with two of my colleagues and also friends to talk a little bit about a group that came together quite quickly and quite sort of spontaneously, which at the time was called Caremongering and Mutual Aid for Sudbury in the time of COVID-19. And so I'm going to go to the next slide and let our first presenter introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ren. I am a queer non-binary person who does a lot of community work here in Sudbury. I've been on the board of Fierte Sudbury Pride, and I've helped run various marches and demonstrations around town. I also run workshops on body positivity and various mental health peer support groups, both online and in person. And my deepest held belief is that we all need a felt sense of community and mutual support in order to thrive, and that capitalism takes that away from us. So most of my time is spent in pursuit of growing that community. I also live with mental illness, pain, trauma, poverty, all that good stuff. So that's me.
Hello, my name is Shala. Currently working in retail management, trying to infuse my work with a social justice-based approach. My background in activism actually comes from more corporate social responsibility initiatives. I worked with the Body Shop and Cruelty Free International in bringing their Forever Against Animal Testing campaign to the United Nations. Definitely changing focuses now, getting down to more of a grassroots level rather than focusing on engaging consumers. I'm trying to engage community. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. Definitely believe in fat liberation and fat politics. And an anti-colonial feminist. I definitely use way too many exclamation marks in my online correspondence.
And hello, my name is Shayna Calix, and I have been living here in what we now call Sudbury for 13 years. I've done a lot of work in mental health and addictions for those past few years, and more. I'm a person with lived and living experience, have done a lot of activist work, specifically community organizing, Take Back the Night, and I say general S disturber, probably know what that means. Also queer, also an anti-colonial feminist, working on my relationship as a non-settler, but definitely a resident on stolen land or inhabitant on stolen land, and really excited to chat with you all today about this group that came together, as I said, quite spontaneously. So I'll begin just a little bit in talking about what we mean by caremongering and mutual aid. And so what happened when this first began, this COVID situation, we saw that there was a lot of people looking to support each other, but not necessarily knowing how to do so. And we know that often when we see examples of support, specifically in the mainstream, it's often in the form of charity. Charity, as we know, is often when it's a framework when people who often have more of the means in our community give just a little bit to poor folks, and that is often to make folks look a little better. There are often strings attached to those attempts, and from our understanding and also from analysis by anti-capitalist activists, is that there's often ways in which control is part of that. And so we see that charity can often uphold systems that continue poverty, racism, homophobia and transphobia, heteropatriarchy, ableism, and of course land theft. And this comes from Big Door Brigade, and we have the link there. And if anybody wants this presentation after, I'm more than happy to share that with them after. And so we know that the people who experience the most of the oppression when it comes to this are people who are already marginalized. And we knew that that's not something we wanted to engage in. So at this time, there were a number of caremongering and mutual aid groups that were popping up, specifically in larger urban centers, such as what we now call Toronto and what we now call Montreal. And they were based on what we call mutual aid. So mutual aid departs from these norms of charity, social services, and non-profitization in several key ways. So that includes an understanding of the system and that people are suffering under the system that creates poverty, crisis, and vulnerability. That there's a lot of control that's most experienced by people who are in power, and therefore people who are marginalized experience that control on them. Mutual aid allows for transparency about how people work, so a lot of conversations about how people access the means and how people discuss how to share those means. Lots of open meetings and open for people to talk about how they want that group to run. Consensus-based, really focus on self-determination, and really important to think about, that this is not about the giver, that we are thinking about the long-term commitment to provide support to people in our community. As we're hearing a lot, when are we going to go back to normal? I'm actually really hoping that we never go back to normal, because normal wasn't working, as we all know, and I'm sure this is stuff you've all said to each other, and hopefully mutual aid is one way in which that normal gets changed. So pass it on to Ren. You're muted, Ren. Ren, you're still muted.
Oh, hi. What is technology anyway? I don't know. So yeah, this all started when I read Shayna's post about starting a group in Sudbury, like the ones that were started in Toronto and Montreal. She had posted something saying like, has anything started here in Sudbury? Maybe we should do it. And me being the person I am, who gets very excited about things, and like I've started a million Facebook groups, I just jumped right on it, and I was like, yes, I'm gonna do it. I'm starting it. So I whipped up a group within minutes, and I definitely recommend for all of you doing group work to check in with everyone and make sure you establish admins and everything before doing that, because I may have made it look like I was taking over the whole operation, but we sorted it out. So yeah, when I was creating it, of course there's I used the Toronto and Montreal groups as my template. I checked out their groups and looked at the kinds of rules and regulations that they created, and just kind of to get an idea of what it was all about. And anyway, so with Facebook groups, you're able to create rules and have people agree to them. So I did that. I did some fiddling about to figure out how to make sure that everyone had read the rules and made sure they answered questions that we set up. We wanted to make sure that people who were joining the group had the same kind of values that we did. So we wanted to make sure there were questions that ensured, one, they were from the area, and two, that they also believed in mutual aid, that they were familiar with the concept. And I can go deeper into how to set up a Facebook group if that's something that people are curious about, but I'm not going to go into that right now because it is kind of, it took a little bit to kind of figure it out, and we all kind of helped each other by using other accounts to sign in and figure out how to answer questions and things. But needless to say, we got to figure it out. So yeah, we were expecting a few of our politically active friends to join, but I think it was created on a Thursday or Friday, and by Sunday we had over 1,000 people. And by now I think we have 1.6K, if I'm correct. And yeah, when we first started, we all had different ideas of what this group would look like. And obviously we wanted it to be a place of mutual aid. That's what this was based on. And we wanted it to be a place for people to go and find things that they were looking for and share the things that they had an excess of, especially when we were seeing all the hoarding that was going on and the lack of toilet paper that was happening. We wanted there to be an opportunity for people to find those things without having to resort to paying for them and hoarding and stuff. But some of us also wanted to create a sense of community and share information and tips on how to deal with the pandemic. And it got kind of messy when it first started because there was a lot of people sharing news reports and memes to lift your mood and different kinds of things. And we tried to organize it using tags. So we had an ISO tag, offering, news, humor, things like that. But it quickly became a lot for us to handle. It was us three, and there were a couple other admins in the beginning, just trying to organize all of this and tagging things and trying to just trying to keep things neat and tidy. And it became a little bit much. And around that time, other groups were starting to pop up that were doing more of the news sharing and the article sharing and stuff like that, and more of the humor. I actually started another group called Keep Calm and Enjoy Your Quarantine, and that was just for people to share the different things that were being offered, like online workshops and yoga workshops, and there was CBCs doing different free concerts and stuff. And so we were trying to send people over there and to these other groups, while also communicating to our members that we wanted to start focusing mostly on the people in search of things and people offering things. So that definitely decreased our workload. And so now the majority of our time is spent approving and denying posts. Whenever we deny a post, we always send a message about why we're denying it, how they could make the post align more closely to our values, or send them to a group that would be more appropriate. And then, of course, we're always tagging posts with the appropriate tag and moderating comments. Yeah, so that would be the majority of the stuff we've done. Oh, I see we're on to another slide here. So yeah, some of the examples of things that we've seen. We've had people, a group in the GTA was trying to coordinate delivery of face shields to Sudbury. So that was coordinated through our page. around Easter time, there was several families that were looking for ingredients and things for their Easter dinner. And I was lucky enough to be involved in helping this one family. They had nothing, so I had a frozen like whole chicken, and then I posted like who else has stuff, and somebody had potatoes, and somebody had a pie, and somebody had this, and so everybody came together, and I just drove around picking up everything, and then was able to deliver this meal to this family, and that was a really heartwarming thing to be a part of. There was also a garden hobbyist that was looking for help. She wanted to set up some larger beds in her yard, and she wanted to grow things so that she could then share with others. So she posted on there like, looking for help building. I'm not a good builder, but I am a gardener. So if you can help me build, like we can all put our effort into the same thing and share that. Yeah, and like I said, there's also been people who are offering free yoga classes, people offering to, some people aren't able to leave their houses to go pick up prescriptions and stuff, so we've had people go do deliveries for people, and we're very we really want to make sure people are being safe about things, so we're constantly posting, or not constantly, but we have announcements that describe like how to socially distance safely, how to do like doorstep drop-offs, that kind of stuff. Can you guys think of any other cool examples that you've seen?
Well, one thing really, oh, sorry, you go, Shayna.
No, I was gonna say I was sick the other day, and I tried to ask my Facebook friends to help me, and nobody did. And so I'm like, all right, I'll use the group, and then the group came and brought me over cold meds. So that was awesome.
Oh, that's great.
That's actually a really good one. Just something that I thought of that was early on, and that just kind of blew my mind that this was even a problem for people. But there was actually a significant shortage of distilled water, and that became a problem for people with CPAP machines, people who need these things to live. So our group was able to connect people with either distilled water that's already bottled or different ways to distill your own at home, offers to filter water for them. So I'm glad we were able to, connect people with life-saving help.
Yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about that one.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So then I'm just going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the challenges we've seen running this group. This is a new space for me. I think this is a new space for Shayna as well. And then Ren, you run a lot of groups on Facebook, but I don't think we've had a discussion group to this scale, right? So some of the challenges that we've seen, there's 4 admins currently running the page, and there's 1,600 members. So the larger group size poses a challenge for our ability to monitor group activity. Thanks to a lot of trial and error and a lot of collaboration and Ren's innovativeness with Facebook, we've managed to make it so that, posts are subject to pre-approval, like they mentioned. But unfortunately, right, comments are not. So occasionally we'll get tagged into discussions that are, there are problems with gatekeeping or with focusing too much on where somebody could go to purchase the items that they're looking for, when that's really not why we're all here. It's not a flyer group, or a mutual aid group. People are looking for these things. So that's where the admin activity tends to get a little bit more involved and a little bit less easy and formulaic, because you still kind of do have to be scrolling and have presence, right? It's not exactly hands-off work. And then mutual aid and community care are not familiar concepts. So even if people read the rules and they think they understand, to a lot of them, it's still indistinguishable from charity. So on our part, education is an ongoing effort. Part of our regular messaging and declining posts is that we're continually asking people not to ask for money or offer money in exchange for these things, because we're really trying to have more of a trade barter, anti-capitalist approach. another big challenge we have is balancing a desire for community building with the desire to center aid. So like Ren mentioned at the beginning, we had just all kinds of posts flooding in. Anything that could be remotely related to COVID-19 or community or anything was ending up in the group. And I think we did find some really good ways to still foster that sense of community while still centering aid. But excuse me, sorry. But sometimes this can still limit member-to-member connection, just as a necessity. So that's some of the challenges that we've kind of faced in establishing this group in town. But because we've grown so large, that allowed us to partner with other grassroots groups to amplify things like free grocery delivery options. There are a couple other groups that we will regularly link people to if they're looking for somebody to deliver their groceries, because they've got that down to a science. We've also been able to amplify mental health and peer support efforts. So there have been people offering, laughter yoga, distance meditation, but we'll also amplify NISA groups. And Ren also created a peer support group specifically for dealing with the stress from living in a pandemic. So we're also able to amplify those efforts to to foster a balanced approach to community care and health. Our low barrier approach has seen aid exchange in the form of everything. Right? So from sanitizer, masks, and toilet paper to prepared meals, baking ingredients, craft supplies. We're trying to encourage the community to rethink need and wellness beyond the bare essentials of survival. We're constantly working on changing the conversation away from people being in desperate need or dire need before they ask for help. A lot of people, even if they are in those situations by somebody else's view, they're not going to self-identify that way. And need is going to look different for everybody. So we just want to encourage that sense of community care without gatekeeping. And then just in terms of, especially if this is something that we're going to keep doing long term, some things that we're looking at hopefully implementing with a little bit more leadership help if we can get more volunteers on board. One thing we'd really like to do is to have more bilingual and francophone representation in group leadership in order to better serve non-English speaking community members. And then something we've seen in other mutual aid groups that we haven't implemented here yet is integrating consistent aid parcel delivery and grocery delivery into the group somehow. So having volunteers dedicated to doing that and making connections in order to put together these aid packages, kind of like the wonderful Easter dinner, that stone soup that Red managed to put together. It would be great to be able to do that more consistently and in a more organized way. So we could do that either by partnering more closely with other groups that are offering those things, or by recruiting more volunteers and implementing that ourselves. So that's those are some of our goals for the near future.
All right, thanks so much. That's really great. We're a little bit over time, so if it's all right with everyone, we're gonna let Cora get started, and we will have time at the end to come back for more questions. Lily, were there any really pressing questions that we need to get to right now?
Well, there was your question, whether it was going to continue.
Yeah, she addressed that a little bit, so.
And then just, is there any initiative between police and people living on the streets? Because police sort of shoo away panhandlers.
Is the question, are we working with police?
Yeah, have you interacted at all with them and trying to get them not to harass people on the streets? No.
Sorry.
No worries.
Not my thing.
Yeah. So yeah, many of us working grassroots don't do that. But yeah, so let's move on to the next presentation just in the interest of time. So, Cora, if you're ready, Cora Raysilk is with Myths and Mirrors Community Arts, and they're going to talk about how they've been moving their workshops and activities to an online space because they do like some really great work in the community with drop-in. So this is a big change. You set, Cora? You need to just unmute yourself.
Hi.
Yeah, you are.
So my name is Cora, and I am the Artistic Director at Myths and Mirrors Community Arts. I'm just trying to figure out how to share my screen here. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Looks good.
Okay. All right, so Myths and Mirrors Community Arts. Our mandate is to educate and promote the public's participation in the arts by developing and providing the tools, resources, and support for communities to express themselves. Myths and Mirrors has been around since 1996. And over the years, we've been working with diverse groups throughout Sudbury to develop art projects, events, and programs that provide opportunities for creative expression. Our goals have been to create innovative experimental art, to engender a sense of community identity, and most importantly, to provide a forum for the marginalized to express themselves. We nurture strong relationships with people who have stories and experiences to share, creating meaningful art together in exchanges that deepen understanding and solidarity with one another. So this picture, both these pictures are from our first community arts project, which was called A Show of Hands. And it was a literal show of hands in opposition to the development of a local green space. It was originally installed on a fence, as you can see, but it is now in the Mackenzie Branch Library. So you might have seen it there. These are just some pictures from past projects. You've probably seen some Myths and Mirrors murals around town. We also did a lot of stilt walking, paper mache puppets, and of course, community celebrations. Over the years, we've been able to work with lots of different communities. Somewhat recently, we had our ATA program, which was weekly art workshops for folks that identify as transgender. We also had Project Arm Her, which was a collaborative project with the Sex Workers Advisory Network of Sudbury. And we've always done child and youth programming, as well as public art at festivals and other community events. So our current project that we have been doing is the Circling Project, which is essentially to bring folks together to connect and create art about the issues that are impacting our communities. So for the past year and a half, we've been doing various circles. We've been talking about homelessness, violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit folks, as well as the overdose crisis. So these circles led to the development of two drop-in programs that one launched last fall. That was Sudbury Street Arts, and that drop-in is geared towards low-income folks and those that are experiencing or have experienced houselessness. Our second drop-in was the Underground, and we'd been doing that for a month when COVID happened. So it was just starting out, and then it had to be put on hold. So, as I said, COVID-19, how has it impacted us? Well, there's the obvious thing. We had to cancel a lot of workshops, which of course impacts community members, but also local artists and creatives that we had been hoping to work with. We also had to postpone programming, and that was specifically related to our drop-in programs, and that's been really hard, especially with Sudbury Street Arts, because we were starting to see consistent attendance, and we had support from community and in terms of people like reaching out to donate baking for the workshops and food, and we had just started a zine project on the housing crisis, so we felt like we really had something good going, and then COVID-19 happened. So that work has been put on hold for the time being. So beyond like the obvious things like canceling programming, it's the uncertainty of like, how long is this going to happen? How long is this going to continue? And though that uncertainty is organizational, like in terms of our funding, our fundraising, staffing. So there's those kind of behind the scenes concerns, but also the functional uncertainty, like how do we function? As a community arts organization, the work is based on bringing people together. So we've really been questioning just like, what is the role of community arts now? Because certainly that need for coming together and for connection is still there, and probably greater than before. So thankfully, there's the internet. So we've been moving some of our programming online. Right when this all started happening, we were in the early phases of a project with Naomi actually, and some other local artists and community members that was going to be based on the climate crisis. So we had started planning that project and figuring out what that's going to look like. But of course, central to that project was in-person gatherings. So it became clear that we were going to have to reevaluate that project and reimagine it. And so honestly, I was really grateful to have Naomi and Elise and these people that were still committed to the project, but also willing to experiment with like an online virtual space. And that was really important to be able to develop our first online workshop, which was called You Are the Commons, Gifts to the Earth. And so this workshop was done with a local artist named Elise Portal, and she led a visualization on Zoom that allowed people to connect with nature and visit real or imagined places in nature and share about that experience. And it went really well. We had, I believe at one point, 25 people on the call. And people were really open to sharing their experience with the visualization and share artwork that they were inspired to create from that process. So this has led us to develop a second workshop, which was kind of a follow-up to this. It's called She is Awakening, Emerging Through Art and Sound. And this is going to be another Zoom workshop that will essentially combine art and sound and nature. We haven't officially launched it yet, so I don't want to say too much now, but we will be releasing information about that in the next week or so. So some things like that I found helpful as we've been shifting to an online space is just being flexible and accepting that things are gonna look different than I imagined. And to work with the tools, not try to fight it, or not try and, like, for example, we were planning like a natural dye workshop, and like that just can't happen online. It would, maybe you could do a webinar or something, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be a community arts workshop. So with that limitation, we've been able to develop the visualization and working with sound and working in other ways that that can work online. So we're not fighting it, we're working with it, which has allowed me anyways to be more creative in the work. I really focus on visual arts, I find. So having to work online and with Zoom and these virtual tools, it's forced me to think outside the box and like look at different mediums and different ways of collaborating. And that's been really exciting for me. And it allows us to still honor our intentions. So like the goal of this climate crisis project was to get people to connect and share and reflect on how they interact with nature and their relationship to nature. So while the workshop is different, the program is different, the intention is the same. And I feel like we're still honoring that intention in the design of these workshops. And I would also say reaching out, having good people around that are willing to experiment has been very important. But also looking at what other cities, other communities are doing, how they're navigating. I've had lots of conversations with mentors and other people I know in community arts, and just knowing that we're all in the, like, trying to figure this out together has been reassuring. And, you know, like, there's no right answer right now. You know, what worked before isn't going to work now, and we can't try and force it. And that has been a big learning for me. I do want to say though, what has been a challenge, like, I'm grateful for the virtual tools. I'm grateful to be able to still connect with people. But I also realize that these tools aren't accessible to everyone. And especially with the folks that we were engaging with through the Sudbury Street Arts program, a lot of them don't have access to the internet or to devices. And so that's been really hard, like losing touch with those people. And so reflecting on that and moving forward, but being mindful of that, and still trying to think, like, how do we honor those commitments we made to that community, and how can we revisit that? How can we still offer support and do that in a good way? So that's things I'm still wrestling with, trying to figure out. And the uncertainty is still there. We don't know how long this will go on for. So it's kind of like having to plan for two worlds, one that's in person and one that might still be virtual. So while these virtual things are great, it's not an answer to everything. So I just wanted to mention that as more and more things go online, it's important to remember that that's not going to work for everybody. So yeah, that's about it. That's where we are. Oh, this is a little bit on the challenges. So uncertainty, and not everyone can access the tools. So you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. We also have mythsandmirrors.org is our website, where you can learn about more of our online programming that's coming up, and also how we are going to navigate the challenges of working with the folks we were working with before, and how we are going to honor that work we started. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Cora. And I think that's really important for all of us to keep in mind and think about whatever level or issues we're working on. But we'll segue now to Rochelle, because part of what we're doing now is more online. And for many of us, these are new tools and new skills. So Rochelle has offered to share some tips that might be helpful to some of us. And just hopefully be tools in being more flexible and thinking about that online space while we also think about what we can do in the community.
Okay, good evening. I'm Rochelle Niemela, and I belong to a whole bunch of community groups. And I think a lot of the people who have shared previously, obviously, have demonstrated how they're using some of these tools in a really beneficial way. I wanted to touch on 6 things and touch more on how organizers and people who are leading and working in teams can actually use what's available, quote unquote, online to get things done. So we'll start with these 6 things. Email. So email is pretty much the one thing that almost everybody has, although in the community garden project that I've been involved with recently, as you've heard, we have hit a number of individuals who wanted to participate but didn't have email addresses, and that we had to deal with over the telephone. So for many people, it is the only way that they do communicate to groups of people in terms of planning projects. But the reality of it is that not everybody is quote unquote online. So we have to be careful in terms of how we use email. Email, I don't know about you guys, but email has been flooding my inbox. There's lots of disconnected threads, people starting new conversations, people replying to selective groups of people, sometimes leaving people out of critical discussions. So you have to be really careful how you actually use email to do your business instead of doing things in what would normally be meeting together in order to sort some things out. The use of reply all has been very frustrating. I've heard from a number of individuals who get pulled into conversations that they really aren't part of or interested in, and they get into these loops of discussions that they really don't want to be there with. So you have to be careful in terms of who you're addressing and when you're sending those email messages around. Email is a great way for circulating documents, not good for collaborative editing, obviously, and not good for finding the most recent version. Is this version 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 that I'm looking at right now? Because as I'm searching my email for the document that I want to talk about when I'm online talking to somebody else, it may not be the version that the other person has. So there are some limitations, but in many instances, it may be the only thing that will tie people together. So you just have to be really careful and monitor and make sure that it's not getting really out of hand. We heard that social media is really good. Obviously, things like Twitter, Instagram, and other social media platforms are not good for discussions and decision making. Facebook groups are good for a planning team. because they can be a closed groups. You're not having to monitor 1,600 plus people who are trying to respond to things. The discussion threads can be kept together so you can easily see the history of the discussion. But the other side of things is that not everybody is on Facebook. And there are a lot of people who really do not want to be on Facebook because of a variety of reasons. So you have to pick and choose your tools depending on who's on your team and who you're trying to collaborate with. Facebook messaging is good for quick answers and discussions. But again, if you're not on Facebook, you don't have a Facebook address, then that can be problematic as well. Shared storage is not often thought about as online collaborative tools, but it is something that you should have in your toolkit when you are trying to do things online. There are a number of platforms for storing documents that are good alternatives to having to hunt through email. Most platforms have a free version with enhanced space that costs something as a paid plan. They have the ability to share files and folders with others, and some of them, most of them have collaborative options. And most of them now have mobile app versions. So I'm just going to touch on 3 that I use. Dropbox, the free storage is 5 gigs. You can earn more space. It's really great for people who use Windows. You can share files and folders with other people, and collaboration is possible with something that they brought online a couple of years ago called Dropbox Paper. So a lot of the community groups that I work with store lots of files in Dropbox. Google Drive is a favorite of a lot of people. Much bigger storage. It has the most generous of all of the free plans. It's also really great for collaboratively working on documents using Google Docs and Sheets. So you don't have to be a Windows user only to collaborate on Word and Excel stuff. It's very, the synchronization with Windows Explorer is a lot more complicated. So sometimes it's hard to find the information that you are trying to share with people and that is shared with you. The space limits are shared with other Google services like Gmail and Photos. And what's understood in all of this is that you do need a Google account, although Google accounts do not necessarily mean Gmail. You can have a Google account under your Hotmail account or a business account. The really great thing also about Google Drive is that there is a photos component, so photos.google.com, that does have unlimited storage for photos. You can pick when you start off whether you're doing the high resolution original file version, at which point in time it does count toward your quota, the 16 gigs. But if you're choosing the option that is, good enough to view online, you can have unlimited storage. So it's really great to have a space where you can share all of the pictures of 23 community gardens that you can pulled from if you need to find a specific picture, because you can store lots and lots of photos there. OneDrive, the free storage is 5 gigs. Again, it works really well with Windows Explorer, but not so hot with other platforms. You have to have Office 365 in order to get lots of free storage, 1 terabyte, and also get collaborative tools though, but you have to be a 365 user. So consider doing shared storage as part of your toolkit, because it's a lot easier to find the most recent version of a document and a bunch of files that can very quickly start building from 2 or 3 that you're using as a team to about 25 to 30 to 40 very quickly. There's a whole bunch of tools that are in the team communications category. They're used for what we used to call old style forum type conversations and chatting, sometimes sharing of files. So you may have heard about Slack, Workplace for Facebook, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams. That's not something that the groups that I work with use very much of, basically because it is yet another username and password that you have to use. And often there are individuals in the groups who really don't want to get into a whole whack of new things. They've got enough on their plate just dealing with email and telephone and perhaps Facebook and online storage. So I just thought I'd mention it though. If you're interested in doing team type of communications, you can do a bit of research on that. Video conferencing is the big one, obviously. There's many tools out there. Most have free versions. The free versions, though, often have limitations. You have to be really careful about using video conferencing and having private conversations versus and sharing sensitive data. So they're great for having something that you don't mind that people may or may not learn of. But you have to be a little bit more careful if you're going to be discussing personal information and other very sensitive data, and know your video conferencing program enough in depth to be able to lock things down so that that doesn't get to people who shouldn't have that information. You can usually record the sessions like we're doing tonight. There's some nifty tools that are starting out there. Zoom, the paid version, which we're using tonight, has the ability to do polls and a variety of other things. Now, Zoom is currently the industry leader. They got in under the ground at the ground level first, but they are known still to be the interface that is and the program that is a little bit easier to use and a little bit more robust. It's free and unlimited time for 2 people. Once you get beyond 2 people, the free version has a 40-minute limitation. And then if you're going to have larger groups like this one, you have to get into a paid version. There are other tools out there for video conferencing. You've probably heard of Skype. There's Cisco WebEx, GoToMeetings, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, FaceTime for Apple only. Some of them are really great for one-to-one. Some of them are great for up to 10 people, but not as robust. Some of them only have paid versions. Skype and Google Meet are expanding their free number of user limits because they want to compete with Zoom, that, as I mentioned, is probably the most popular platform out there right now. So you can try a couple. I can tell you that I've tried a number of them, and I still prefer Zoom. Don't discount the telephone. Texting is good for asking quick questions to 1 or 2 people. People don't check their email all that often during the day sometimes, but people who have a smartphone or a cell phone usually do check their text on a regular basis. So you're more than likely to get a faster response if you have a really quick question for somebody. Calling and talking to somebody eliminates the misunderstandings. And I want to really highlight that because I have a sometimes ironic or sarcastic sense of humor that doesn't lend itself well to when I try to incorporate how I would speak to a person in person, when I try to do the same thing in texting or emailing or messaging. So calling and talking to somebody, especially if you have a sensitive issue, that's, to me, is the best thing because there's no mistake for interpretation and you can have an honest and open discussion with the other person. Telephone and video conferencing are also the 2 mediums that I found that really bring in the social aspect to working with teams because you get to see the other person and or talk to the other person. And I find that I'm using telephone and video conferencing applications as well as email as the major way of doing my communications and work with people right now. The one issue with the telephone, obviously, is that while you can record those conversations, it's not something that people typically do. So in meetings like this one, where you're wanting to preserve the conversations and the presentations, it's really great. So telephone is, you would use that in a situation where you're not really looking at preserving who said what and when and where. That's about it. I think we've had some really good examples of how some of these things have been used tonight, and I'm open to questions.
All right. I actually do not see any questions now. Maybe people need a little time to digest. So we're going to move on to the discussion section. But first, I just really want to acknowledge, similar to what Cora was speaking about, that one of their biggest challenges right now is staying connected to community members who aren't online. So as Rochelle was talking about, the phone is really important. And I think it's something we have to keep present and think about. And also think about, being physically on the street, like with chalk art or other ways to connect with people in the community space while still physical distancing. And on the flip side of that, also thinking about people are spending a lot of time working online now. Many people are working from home in an online setting. So we have to be sensitive to Zoom fatigue now and people's work-life balance as well. So I think you're going to see at the bottom of your screen, you should see an invitation to turn on your video. So if you'd like to join the discussion by video, you can accept that. If you'd rather stay, just by audio, that's fine as well. You'll want to keep your audio muted if you're not speaking, so you don't get background noise like my telephone ringing in the background right now. We don't have 40 of those happening at the same time. And if you've joined us by video and you'd like to, have something to say, like just wave at me and I'll note your name down, make sure to get to you. And if you'd rather type in the chat box, we've got that open. Lily's keeping an eye on that as well. And lastly, if you'd like to see everyone at once and you're still on speaker view, you might want to go up and choose gallery view, and then you'll see everyone's face rather than just the person speaking. So that's a personal preference. So before we start, I just want to give an opportunity. We're still recording now, so if anyone's going to join the discussion by video and has a strong objection to having the discussion recorded, please speak up now. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone, so we'll keep recording then, just so people who aren't here can also benefit from the questions. So I think we're going to start off first. I'll just ask if anyone has any approaches to share that they're using with their group or that they've seen happening with other groups that they think are working really well or that are a really good approach that other groups might consider using. Does anyone? Okay, so Lily.
Yeah, just recently I've started working with Masks for All. So people are working all over the city and we're supplying fabric or elastic. And what I found is you can usually find that one person that's out in the valley or out in Chelmsford or out in Lively who will be that person that helps you so you don't have to keep driving there to do stuff. They become that person in the neighborhood who you can rely on. So sort of keep your ears open for those people who say, hey, if you need anything, let me know, because I'm going to, and then, okay, from now on, you're supplying elastic and fabric from the valley. So just listen to those people who become your helpers out there.
Yeah, that's great to know. I've seen that happen at a neighborhood level as well, which is great. Does anyone else have examples of approaches or projects they've seen that they'd like to share that other groups might be able to benefit from? No? Shayna?
Well, I think, and you should probably talk about some of the groups that you're involved in, Naomi. So for instance, and that's been happening even before COVID, the flyers that we get in our mailboxes for our specific neighborhood, So the Roxborough Greenbelt neighborhood that we get. So it was a really awesome, so folks who live in the neighborhood or who knew about it, to get those flyers at this moment and to remind us to, you know, put little decorations in our windows or do chalk on the ground. So, you know, not forgetting about those old school, you know, ways of connecting, like just even with flyers, you know, a half page in the mailbox or dropped off. I found like that was the day that arrived. I couldn't imagine me having more of an amazing reaction to it, even though I know I get it once a quarter. This time it really did have sort of an impact.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, and I have to say I've seen that happening on Copper Street and in the Valley. There's been quite a few neighborhoods where someone spontaneously just said, we've got to get a little neighborhood flyer out, and they'll have somebody who's, you know, agrees to be the contact person so they can just facilitate it mutually just at that neighborhood level. So yeah, there's been a lot of great things like that, and just like thank yous and wacky art displays all over the city that have been pretty fun as well. Any other examples people would like to share? So first Rochelle and then Paula.
Sorry, I didn't wave.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that sometimes you have to be flexible enough to operate in the quote unquote medium that that the group is actually using. So I belong to a community action network, the Ward 8 Community Action Network, and we've been working with Pièce Tsubi's, which is a social housing complex in our ward, for a number of years in terms of nurturing them to do projects and to be a voice in the community. And they communicate via Facebook group and also Facebook messaging. And so they don't respond to email. The odd time we talk on telephone, but that's the way that they do things. And they've organized themselves in the same way as the caremongering group, where you'll see things like, I need a new, you know, I need a box of Band-Aids. Anybody have some? I'm cooking something right now and I'm all out of oil, and somebody will answer, I'll bring it over. They've also got a significant number of people who are self-isolating because they're either pregnant or they have some health issues that they don't want to go out at all. So they've got this, you know, huge support group of all of the residents there, where somebody can say, I need baby wipes and I'm pregnant, I'm in my last trimester, I'm not going to Costco, and somebody will pop up, speak up and go, I'm going tomorrow, let me know what you need. So Facebook for them is what they use. And so if you tried using something else, they just wouldn't respond. So you have to be really open to using the tools and the techniques that your target audience is wanting to participate in.
Okay, thanks, Paula.
The example I want to talk about is an example that was used locally in PEI. We do it sort of here, it's composting. PEI does their compost province-wide so well that they actually sell their compost product as an income generating for their province. We live in Northern Ontario, and we have a lovely area that we live in that is green, but a lot of times we package up our compostables and put them at the curbside to go away rather than feed them back into the earth. I would like to see an initiative started where we do something compostable locally, so an activity that we could all get the gardeners excited, invested in, and do in our own backyards, yet help the earth collectively. And it would fit into an activity to keep us busy in the summertime. It would fit into helping reduce our carbon footprint and reduce our emissions as well, kind of thing. Eventually it might turn into an income generating event, and if it doesn't, that's fine. that's one of the community things I would like to see happen.
All right. So I'm not seeing any more waving or, okay, I have something from Derek. Just making sure that people check in to a lot of the webinars and training sessions that are happening in tourism industry, museums, art, Charity Village and Google Grow. Those are all examples that he's given. So we're going to save these comments as well, and we'll try to put in links with them when we send them around as well, and so people can check those out. So I think the second question I have is if you have challenges or barriers that you've come up against that you'd like to share and that you hope others might have suggestions or solutions for. So again, just wave at me or stick it in the chat if you do. I know Cora had brought one up earlier, which is like a really important question, is what do you do to connect to people who are living on the streets that you've built relationships with when you can no longer have drop-ins or the space that you're working in has been closed. So that's maybe one thing if people have suggestions or examples around that. And if people have other challenges or barriers they'd like to bring up, just let me know. Really? You're like, you got it all figured out, guys. Shana?
Well, I'm thinking about NISA, Northern Initiative for Social Action, who's had to close their doors and move all of their programming online, and wondering about how they're doing. And, you know, they do have the Warm Line, which is a phone-based support system. But, you know, not everybody necessarily has a phone, even though everyone's supposed to have one, you know, specifically if you are connected to services. So I was just thinking about that space, and they are offering telephone support during the day now too. So, but I see them using a lot of online and virtual platforms, but perhaps they might have more ideas on how to do so, because that's one place that I know has probably been very affected by having to close doors and having a whole set of people not be able to connect like they had previously. So no answers. I have no answers. I just have more questions.
I also think about, you know, a lot of the ways that those of us that have homes are connecting with each other is using the space outside our homes or in our yards to create messages. And maybe we need to be more adventurous in using public spaces or spaces where people who don't have homes or simply don't have a home that's really nice to spend time in are using those spaces, and maybe we need to be populating those spaces with some positive messages or ways to connect, and that might be something we could be thinking about. Anyone else? No. So lastly, I guess maybe you've had a little bit of time for all of these great presentations to percolate in your brain a little bit. Might take a few more days. But if you have questions that weren't answered yet, or that you still had for any of the speakers tonight, or for any of the other people on the call, yeah, throw them in the chat, or just you know, wave at me and add them in. Okay. No.
I'd like to just get a sense of from people if this was good or not. We're trying something new here, And so yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, any feedback, when we send around the email, ask for feedback again, but if you have any like impressions now, like did the format work for you? This is as new to us and definitely for me, new, very new for me. So if you have any feedback about what could make it work better or what worked and didn't work, that would be great. Richard?
Yeah, no reaction on what can work better. I think Zoom is a good platform, and I think it's very useful, and I found it very informative from the 3 presentations, because our GSWA is kind of a group that's only focused on certain issues and isn't really aware of a lot of other things that are going on in the city, and this really helps me to be aware of what other groups are doing and the initiatives that they're taking. So I personally found it really helpful, and I think Zoom's a good format to use.
Richard, what's GSWA?
Greater Sudbury Watershed Alliance. So we're all about the quality of water within the city and issues around salt and septic systems and that type of thing. But, our demographic is reasonably old. And so I would be a pretty typical example of the people who are involved in that. And of course, so that has some benefits, but it also means that we're really not aware of what younger people are doing in terms of the city and what sort of initiatives they're undertaking. And obviously, we're going to have to move to Zoom meetings, and some of us are very comfortable with Zoom, but there's lots of others that I think are going to be an issue, although we do have access to a phone, so you can still access the meeting that way and with whatever device you have. But I think it's going to be a challenge for us, and certainly, in terms of our original plans for a public forum, we had 3 great speakers coming up to talk about how global climate change is going to affect water environments or watershed environments here in Sudbury, and that had to be canceled because of COVID-19. And I'm not sure how we're going to go forward with that, because I think it's really unlikely that they're going to lift the public distancing requirements. And I think that the 6 feet is going to stay with us for a long time. And so if you're looking at bringing people together, and a large number of people, I think at this point, there aren't really the facilities here in town, so we may try to present that information over video conference, but I'm not sure how that'll work. But I think we're going to have to experiment and see how things go, because I don't think we're going to have much choice at the rate things are moving with COVID-19.
Yeah, and that's definitely something you think about when you want to fill council chambers and you're not allowed in. Yeah. Right. Is there any other feedback for us, Cora?
Hi. I just wanted to share that I've been participating in bi-weekly Zoom Hangouts with a collective in Toronto called Artists for Climate and Migrant Justice and Indigenous Sovereignty. It's a very long title, but that's what they're called. And I was actually hoping to bring that group to Sudbury for a project. Of course, that's on hold. But they have been hosting these bi-weekly Zoom gatherings where they talk about various issues. They had like a zine project, but they talk about like guerrilla gardening, and also similar topics like how can we maintain activism when we can't physically gather. And it's just been really helpful, even though it's not local. It's been helpful to connect with other folks that have the same concerns, but that are still committed to the work. And how they run their meetings is that they have different Zoom rooms, so you can go into whatever room you want to talk about. So they'll have one that's devoted to guerrilla gardening, they'll have one devoted to like art activism. And then, so it's kind of cool to come together like that for a couple hours, twice a month.
That's really good to know, Cora.
Yeah, and it's open to anyone. So if you wanted to participate, you could find them on Facebook.
Yeah, I find personally I'm getting so many invitations to be online, and I just don't want to be, well, either my internet's not working or I just don't want to be online. So it's kind of this weird thing where I could I could go listen to these awesome activists. And I'm like, I just want to read a book. So that's been like a funny tension. All right. Any last sharing of resources or feedback, Shala?
I don't really have any more resources to share. I just wanted to add, my feedback that I thought this was great. I'm very new to the more grassroots activist space in town. So I think this was a really wonderful way to connect with everybody and kind of share resources. And I look forward to connecting more with all of you.
Thanks. All right. Well, if there's no more, I just want to really thank everyone for spending their time online with us this evening. And I really want to give a special thank you to all the people that presented, because the reason I invited you is you're doing amazing work, which also means you're spending a lot of time doing that work. And so I know you're really busy, and it was really generous of you to come and prepare a presentation and come and share your experience with us. So I just really appreciate that. So next steps, Rochelle's been recording. She's gonna send the video file, and we'll pop that up online and send you a link, and we'll send a few other notes, I guess, as well. And if you have any other feedback or thoughts, or you want to connect with a specific person who was on the call, let me know, and I'll do that in the next few days. So thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Mhm.